Welcome to Lok Sabha Television. You're watching Climate Matters and I'm Suman Sahai. Today we are going to discuss climate change in the context of the transportation sector and the traffic situation that we have in India. How much does that exacerbate the climate change problem? What are the options that we have to mitigate the situation? And to discuss all of that, we have today with us two experts. Let me introduce Professor Dinesh Mohan from the IIT Delhi and Mr. Dilip Chinoy, who has been associated with the automobile sector forever and is now involved in skill development. Welcome both. Let me ask Dinesh, let me start with you. It's known, for instance, that the transportation sector worldwide is one of the greatest emitters of greenhouse gases. And that our transportation sector, we keep saying, is not such a big sector so as to contribute to greenhouse gases. So let me ask you, number one, how much do you think India's transportation sector, which includes the road, the railway, the ship, the plane, all of that, how do you see that? Which is our worst, weakest area, and which are the areas in which we can say we're doing well?
See, there are problems when we talk of greenhouse gases, because we really don't have a good inventory of what's happening in the country from different sources, really, even up to now. But however, one can say, based on pollution data, that as far as pollution on the ground is concerned, road transport is a problem, and a severe one, especially in cities. And this is in spite of the fact that our vehicle ownership rates are still very low. Just to put it in perspective, say the car ownership in Delhi per capita is about 1/5 that of London.
But there are still too many cars.
No, not number of cars as far as the population is concerned. So total number of cars in Delhi per family as an average is still very low. And not that this is an excuse for keep on increasing it forever and ever, but the fact is it is very low. And up to now in the world, as incomes have increased, car ownership has also increased, though higher in countries like the US and Australia, and lower in countries like Japan or Netherlands and so on. So there's a ratio. So you can operate under the present economic system, you can operate within that ratio, which is we can aim to be a low car ownership society like Japan and not a high one like the US, but we are far away from even being like Japan. So therefore, we'll have to think on how to manage a reasonable life for our population. And if you want to be lower than Japan, then what do we do? Because it won't be easy, because that's what happens with the present system.
I take your point that we don't have that many cars, but look at the way that our cars get jammed up on the road. And
Yes.
I'll come to you maybe, Dilip, with this question. When I was coming here, for instance, I was standing for 30 minutes in a traffic jam, and there was a couple of kilometers of traffic emitting a lot of greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. So we may have a lower car density, as Dinesh says, but we have an extremely bad traffic situation. So what is your comment on that?
If you look at, if I can just answer your first question, then come on to this. If you look at India's ratio of India's overall greenhouse emissions as the total of world emission, the percentage, and compare it in the transport is lower by a factor of 10 as the other average. So the transport sector, in relation to other economies, is actually emitting far less greenhouse gas in India. And the reasons we'll talk about later. But the challenge in India is...
Let me get that. You say that our transportation sector, piece for piece, emits less than piece for piece the transportation sector there?
Not piece, piece for piece, because our transportation mix is slightly different.
Yes.
Because we have two-wheelers, which are among the world's most fuel-efficient two-wheelers. We also have some of the world's most fuel-efficient cars in India. So there is, and we are by nature a small car economy.
Yes.
So there's difference, and this is actually data which is available there. The issue comes, and what Dinesh was talking about is, if you look at emissions in terms of the other emissions and how local emissions, if you talk about particulate matter, or you talk about NOx, or you talk about that, tend to be higher in cities than what the average level is perceived to be. But it is not necessarily that it is the transportation sector that is contributing to that. You know,
To
for
climate change.
to that emission level. For example, let's take the latest source apportionment study which you're talking about, where the statement has been that the dust which is in Delhi is not because of construction, but because of cars on the road. Now, there should be no dust on the road. The dust on the road is coming from the construction sites and from
Right.
the desert winds and all. So,
Right.
you know, as we go forward, the eye of the storm is the auto industry. So
Right.
it's very easy to regulate the auto industry, limited number of people.
Right.
But as we go forward, the danger is we won't have anything left to do in the auto industry. And then by that time, you will not control the other sources of pollution with which you'll have to address that.
Right. Dinesh, what Dilip is saying is that technically we are not badly off, that our cars are not polluting, and that as far as the technology is concerned, we are all right. But it is the other factors that are creating problems. Let us address the traffic issue. How grave do you consider the start and stop traffic, the traffic jams, standing automobiles?
Actually, these are, in a sense, complicated issues because they don't have to do with auto industry. See, I for one would not just let off the auto industry. However, we have to see it in perspective, which is everything depends on what you think an economy should be like.
Right.
Okay, once you decide that car owners should not be taxed, so they don't, in my opinion, every car owner should be charged anything from 5,000 to 10,000 rupees a year as annual tax.
We don't pay tax?
We pay a one-time, for private vehicles, we pay a life, which is nothing. It's almost having a car free, as far as tax is concerned. So in almost all countries, people pay a tax every year. And because we don't do this, we don't even know how many vehicles there are in the country. At present, the official total number of vehicles in the country is probably exaggerated by 40%.
Really?
Because it's a cumulative number over the last 50 years. Including Delhi. So the actual number of vehicles in Delhi.
So are you saying that we say we have more cars than we actually
yes,
do?
certainly. For example, the estimates made for Delhi are that Delhi has about 60% of the total number of motorcycles and cars as per the official number. It's much less. But so all our calculations go wrong if we use the official number. But if you pay an official tax every year, then no one will pay a tax for a car. For example, I own 4 cars, of which 3 have been junked, but I still have the RC for those 3 cars because the fellow who junked them doesn't
RC
want
meaning the registration
certificate. So those 3 cars which have been melted and sold off still exist on the books.
Or they're still statistically there?
They're statistically there in the books. So, but leave that aside. The question you asked was a problem in traffic. And I think we have India is very, what should I say, expertise deficient in almost all fields of endeavor, except maybe a bit in IT.
And
But-
here is Dilip sitting with skill development.
Certainly in traffic management.
Yes,
There are, for example, we don't have any modern traffic managers in the country.
we don't.
For example, if you build a flyover on one junction, it is justified that you'll improve traffic only at that junction. Okay, and then they calculate, you save 3 minutes here and 2 minutes there in this 100 meters. And based on that, they put a money value and justify it. But the correct way to justify any project is what effect does it have in a, say, 5-kilometer radius.
Right.
That's what all modern traffic planning is about, but that needs skills, models, planning, data, experts.
Are we not developing that anywhere?
I think if I can just come in here and add to what you're saying, Dinesh, is that you see, traffic management or traffic is dependent on multiple things: the number of people you have in a city, the difference and distance between their work and place of stay,
The amount they have to commute.
the distance between the children who go to school
Correct.
and where it is, right? And there are different methods to actually address this. So if, for example, take Delhi and they wanted to not allow mixed commercial use, in many places where they closed down shops, people in those living areas had to commute 5 kilometers even to buy bread and other daily
So
necessities.
what you're saying is that it's a part of urban planning.
It is definitely a part of it. So,
But I'll come in here.
Yeah.
That because we have not been able to be a very legal society, we have been saved. because there's a lot
You
of...
think slums are a good idea and unauthorized
No,
constructions
no,
are a good
slums are
idea?
not a good idea, but poor people living all over the city is a very good idea.
Tell
Because,
me why.
because you see, the more educated you are, the more difficult it is to find a job necessarily close, because you have to find a good employer who suits you. Whereas if you are not that well educated, which a lot of people unfortunately are not in the country and in the city, if they are plumbers, carpenters, dressmakers, whatever, cleaners,
Service
chapatis,
providers.
guards, servants, they can find their skill needed in a very small radius.
Right.
So if you distribute them all over the city, that's what they do. They live illegally close to work so that they can walk.
So they don't
Secondly,
contribute
it
to the...
reduces crime, because in those cities which had fascist governments or very strong governments, and they threw them out
Right.
of the city, then like in Nairobi or in Rio, etc., they get sent out of the city and they spend hours walking, coming on, jammed in trucks and so on for work, and they only spend 5, 6, 7 hours at home. So husband and wife don't meet, the children never see their parents, and that completely destroys the lives and society of poorer people. Because of illegality in our cities, these families have a stronger family life.
That's a good point.
And the people, parents go back home, the mother works in 3 homes, goes back home every 4 or 5 hours,
Right.
looks after, and so that's very good for the city.
As far as the planning is concerned, and according to Dilip, as far as the
But that's all
transportation is
illegal.
concerned.
The government doesn't allow you to do it, but we should think on how to do it in a better way. And so what's very interesting is what Dilip said about trip distances, that is, in spite of fantastic public transport system, the number of people who go to work by car in London is about 45%. In Delhi at present is about 15%.
Yeah.
And London has about the same road space in percentage terms as Delhi, or a little less. It has 1/6 the number of cars. More people use them because 45% are going by car.
Right.
Yet they have much less traffic jams than Delhi. So someone has to
In
answer my
London.
question. You have more road space, less cars, shorter trip distances, then why do you have traffic jams? The
But
answer
just
is
tell me, before we'll break shortly, but tell me quickly, that are you in agreement with what Dinesh is saying? That
Yes, I think there is agreement in the sense that we need to relook at how the living space is structured within the city. It is there are different models that can be evolved so that the people who are working and servicing these different areas that people are there could be located close by.
Dilip, I'll come back to you. We'll need to take a short break. We'll take a short break in this discussion, but Dilip and Dinesh are with us, so please don't go away. And we will resume this discussion both on how to smoothen traffic and what to do about the kind of fuels that we have.
We need to develop an incentive system by which it is economical, or it is a pull for an existing owner of an old car to go in for a new car without mandating it.
Welcome back to Climate Matters. We're talking to Dinesh Mohan and Dilip Chenoy about the transportation sector and how much that contributes to climate change, and what we can do to mitigate the situation that we already have. We've heard from both these experts that our transportation sector is not as bad as we think it is, and that many figures are overstated. Let me come back now to you, Dilip. And let me come to a question that needs to be addressed. You said earlier in your discussion that you think that technologically we're on very sound footing, and that our cars are fuel efficient, that our cars are not polluting cars. But what do we do about the old vehicles that we have? I mean, economically there's a whole issue about who can afford new cars with all sorts of clean air technologies fitted into it. What happens to the transportation means and mechanisms, both of freight and people? We obviously have a very large number of old vehicles.
Okay, let me say that it is necessary that we modernize the fleet as we go forward. And I think what Dinesh mentioned about moving to an annual road tax, about linking it to the emissions arising out of the vehicle or the vintage of the vehicles is somewhere that we need to actually go forward. And we need to develop an incentive system by which it is economical, or it is a pull for an existing owner of an old car to go in for a new car without mandating it. If you look at Europe, or you look at China, or you look at other things, when they moved from one emission norm to another, they came out with laws saying that cars which are older than 2 emission norms can't be on the road. Or Japan has increased road tax to such an extent that it makes uneconomical for it to be on the road. So this is one way that we need to address this. The second is in the commercial vehicle sector. Actually, old vehicles depress freight rates. They actually lead to a lot of migration from rail to road. So we need to be able to address that. And I think, here the truckers, or the truck associations themselves have gone and got a study done by Deloitte and gone and recommended to the Ministry of Surface Transport that please introduce a vehicle retirement scheme, allow us to modernize the fleet, etc. They have done it on their own.
But the public perception is that they're the ones who are resisting it.
Yeah, but it's not a political kind of a hot potato. It's actually something which can be done, and someone has to take the call on it. And I think, looking at the efficiencies that will come in here, at a national level, however, there has to be a greater effort to build the rail infrastructure, to look at dedicated freight corridors, and try and move a lot of freight which is on the road, which is long distance, which can be done more economically by rail. And the pricing has to be such that they induce that to happen.
And you think that that's economically feasible?
Yeah,
all the small guys.
The auto industry themselves are talking to the Ministry of Railways to move 20% of the cars produced by rail, move that from road to rail. And you heard about the auto hubs being talked. The Shalimar has been inaugurated, looking at others. It is economically done. And if you build in things like carbon credits and other things, actually a lot more can be done. So that's what we need to do, and look at more inland waterways, sea transport, etc.
That's something we haven't explored at all.
Let me bring it, some details here, because we did a very interesting study in time for the summit in Copenhagen last year.
Right.
This was a collaboration between IIT Delhi, London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, and Oxford University and University College London. What we did is we predicted for 2030 what would happen in the transport sector as far as greenhouse gases are concerned and health in 2030 in London and Delhi.
Right.
And we have to make assumptions for such things. We made assumptions. Suppose we had the best technology expected in 2030 in all vehicles in Delhi, and same thing in London. What happens? And then we change modal shares. How many people walk, cycle, use public transport, cars, motorcycles? And the results were unexpected. Which is that in London, improving the technology made a slight difference for the better, a bit of a difference. But more people walking in London made a huge difference. But even technology helped. Or cycling. But in Delhi, improving just technology made much less difference, because here we expect the number of vehicles to increase over the years. In London, they stay the same in numbers. So therefore, improving technology brings down your emissions a lot, but the total effect of improving technology here has less effect because of increasing number of vehicles to 2030. But if you have just the ratios of walking, cycling, public transport, private vehicle use, as in Amsterdam today, we are not even talking of any other place, a rich city.
But a lot of walking and cycling.
A lot of walking and cycling, which is 30%, 35%. Right? Walking and cycling is about 35%. Then our pollution levels and greenhouse. See, pollution and greenhouse is different. CO2 doesn't increase pollution, but it's a greenhouse gas.
Yes, absolutely.
So, to bring down greenhouse gases and pollution, keeping our walking, cycling, public transport makes a much bigger difference than technology.
Of course.
Future technology.
Of course.
Number one. I don't know enough about freight, but as far as private vehicles are concerned, India and China now have the youngest fleet in the world. The average age of cars in India, I've used the SIAM numbers to calculate it, is about 4.5 years.
I think today Ratan Tata, was it, who made a statement that the global automobile thrust and push is going to be led by China and India. But let me come back.
But let me finish this. That is, if the average age in India of cars today is 4.5 years. Average age of cars in Europe is about 13 years. So the issue is not age of cars. It's the issue of what few cars are.
But 30% of the old cars are contributing to 30% of the pollution.
No, but
so
these are
old
all,
vehicles.
These are all
Now,
sayings, but we don't have an estimate of that.
Dinesh.
What I'm saying, no, but if you take the number of old vehicles, getting rid of, firstly they do very small amounts. So if there's an 20-year-old Fiat, there's an old grandfather who's running it 5 kilometers a day. Or
So you don't think that he's contributing too much
these old
to the...
vehicles will disappear on their own. But if you have a tax, if you have to pay a 5,000 rupee tax per car, then it makes a difference. Then the old vehicle is not that cheap.
I want to take two more points before we close this program. One is to do with the nature of the roads we have, and the other is to do with the kind of fuels that we are using. Very quickly to you, Dilip, do you think that the kind of fuels that we are using are top quality? Because so much depends on the nature of the fuel, the cleanliness of the fuel.
I think that,
and I want you also to talk about biofuels.
I think if you look at the whole fuel aspect, I'd like to divide it into two parts a little very quickly. The first is that world over, when we had the recession, governments there promoted research in hybrid and electric vehicles. Right. And moving to alternate drivetrains. I think India lost a huge opportunity to do that for the automotive sector, and it actually
to create hybrid,
to create local electric cars, local electric vehicles, and to get into a collaborative thing with industry, because it's a mindset. In fact, there was a huge proposal that we wanted to actually demonstrate electric vehicles and hybrid vehicles during the Commonwealth Games in Delhi, but it did not get through because they felt that globally the lithium-ion batteries were available at $1 a watt hour, and a prototype that the industry wanted to develop here was costing $5 a watt hour. So someone in the system did not understand the difference between an off-the-shelf product and developing a prototype.
Tell me, is this what you would call silo thinking, or is this what you would call vested interest?
I would say it's lack of knowledge and information, and a lack of ability, or the not wanting to take risk because of the system in India. So I think we need to encourage collaborative research, collaborative development of alternate drivetrains in India.
When you say drivetrain?
Like hybrids, electric vehicles, hydrogen vehicles. We need
getting off the hydrocarbon fuel.
Yeah, we need to get off. And the second aspect there is that what you're looking at biofuels and the whole classic debate versus land versus fuel versus food debate, and the structure of the ethanol blending and the biodiesel is not necessarily something which is sustainable. So rather than mandating a kind of a 10% blend or something, look at a national 2 or 3 or 4%.
So you are apprehensive in the sector about this also.
Yeah. So
and
third, sorry, I'll just come quickly to that. The whole thing of the sulfur content in the fuels, existing fuels, which you talked about the quality of fuels, we have not, we have a roadmap which ended on 1st April 2005, 2010, which is the auto fuel policy of 2002-2003, which has been the limelight because of the fuel price we control. And we need a roadmap further. So do we, auto industry would like to know whether we're going to 10 ppm in 5 years, or we're going to stick with 50 ppm, and what is the kind of...
but what does the auto industry recommend? I mean, you are the experts
the auto industry,
and the consumers.
The auto industry has actually laid out a roadmap. If you look at the automotive fuel policy, automotive mission plan, which was released by the Prime Minister, I think on 29 January 2007, so there is a roadmap.
And you feel this is a good roadmap?
It is a good roadmap, but then we've got to actually, revisit 2002 and 3 now, get out a 10-year roadmap, put an overall structure
and do some more concrete planning.
Do some more concrete planning.
Dinesh, just like we talked about fuels, the kind of road that you have is also going to determine to a very large extent the amount of emissions, not just the traffic jam and traffic flow, but also the nature of the roads. Now, if my own anecdotal experience is that almost every road is bumpy. And whereas on the one hand, expressways have higher emissions, but is it not true that the quality of roads that we are building is also a contributor to increasing the emission of greenhouse gases?
Maybe, but I don't think these are major. There are some preconditions. If you do not satisfy those essential conditions, nothing else will work. The essential condition for better transport in India is that it should be safe to walk and cycle.
Absolutely.
If you do not do that,
Right.
then anyone who has money will not use public transport because you have to walk 4 times a day to use public transport
Correct.
and cross the road twice a day.
And that's too
So,
much.
so the essential condition, there is no country in the world where public transport is used by people who can afford private vehicles, where walking is not comfortable and unsafe. So making walking and cycling safe and comfortable, which includes safe from crime, that means you must have hawkers and vendors on the road to
Right.
keep the streets
So that
safe
it's
from
peopled,
crime.
yeah.
Or shops, either.
Yeah.
So central Bombay, which has streets, shops abutting the sidewalk, are safe.
Right.
If you don't have shops on the ground floor abutting the sidewalk, then you must have hawkers and vendors.
Yeah, because otherwise
So
it would be
that makes it free
isolated.
from crime. So women and children then can walk safe. Then it must safe from accidents. So you can cross the road safely and walk.
Right.
So unless you do that,
So
no
what you're saying,
technology
Dinesh,
will
we're
work.
running out of time,
Yeah.
but what you're saying is that walking and cycling has to be made such an integral part of our
A
transportation.
necessary integral part.
And necessary integral
No
part.
technology is going to work according to our study, because technology will play a 30% role. This is going to play a 70% role.
Now tell me guys, we just need to close up. One last comment from you, Dilip, on what do you think that India's transportation sector can do better? In one sentence.
I think we need to look at the whole ecosystem. Business as usual does not mean cars increasing by 10% a year and the population increasing by 10% a year and only focusing on the
That
cars.
it means?
We need to look at a city that is populated in a manner that is economically sustainable.
Right.
Current way Delhi is not, if it's going to reach
Right.
23 million by whatever year it is.
Right, Dinesh, in 2 words.
You have to make it comfortable for people to use the transport of choice
Correct.
based on their income.
Correct.
You can't force
So-
people to use public transport if they earn less than 10,000 rupees a month.
So what you're saying is that everybody must have a transportation choice which is safe, which is economical, and which is good
And
for
by
the
choice.
environment. And by choice, and which is good for the environment. Thank you both of you very much. Thank you for watching Climate Matters. We have had a very interesting discussion. For comments and responses to what you have heard today, please mail us at climatematters@gmail.com with your reactions, and we'd be happy to have a dialogue with you as this program commences. Thank you.